So welcome to the Treatment Room podcast. Morning, Andy.
Morning, Phil. How are you today?
Oh, I'm feeling bright and breezy as we move towards autumn.
Well, that's it,
Nice.
isn't it? It's in the northwest, It's starting to get a little bit darker, a little bit cold,
that brings me to one of the things we're going to talk about towards the end of this session, which is preparing for the festive season and what's the right thing to do around staff parties. So we'll leave that seed there and let's pick up on. So I think we're going to talk about some webinars that we've recently been recording, and I know you've been recording some great content with Sandra and Sarah that we're going to talk about. And I think the other area we're going to look at this time is the famous, I think you describe it as the M curve, don't you?
M curve, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll leave people hanging because people might be thinking, "What on earth is the M curve?" And other people will go, "Oh, I know what he means."
Yeah, I know what he means.
So we'll have a bit of a play with the M curve in a few minutes' time. So I think we're going to start with, it's not me, it's you, Andy.
Yeah. So for me, Phil, I remember when you presented this idea across to say, look, you know, you'd had a conversation with our kind of great affiliate KBL and Sarah around what happens when partners fall out. And I know a lot of probably listeners who are on their own in business or haven't really even considered, you know, might not be gone into partnership yet or hadn't really considered, even if they have, you know, the nice stage of having a business partner and they're all rosy and will never fall out, you know. And somebody who's been in partnership, I mean, I've got 3 of my businesses are in joint ventures. So, you know, I'm well, 4 of them probably, you'd say. So, you know, and I guess hadn't really considered myself kind of, okay, whoa, interesting. So I definitely was, my curiosity was up. But for me, and so I think it was brilliant that you got the both Sarah and Amy together, because I think Amy added a whole different dimension to it all. But I think some of the content, and I would suggest any listener who's listening to this that didn't look at that, it's not me, it's you presentation by them, there was an awful lot of things in there which really made me think a bit deeper into businesses that we support, you know, even personal businesses with me, because there was a lot around, you know, divorces of your business partner. So divorce, when your business partner gets divorced, how's it impact on your business? And especially if they own shares, what does that develop, and all those kind of things. I think there's a lot. I definitely, it opened my eyes to lots of things where I think, especially when we're having conversations with our clients and the people that we work with, are they prepared? If it's not, if what happens if their relationship falls down? What happens to that? Are they protected? Is the business protected? If they are in partnership agreements, especially as directorships, and then they then bring, and then their wives then, you know, I know it's a way of, if you give your wife some of your shares, it helps reduce your tax, your personal tax and stuff. And I know that's a common thing that accountants obviously encourage to do.
Encourage, yeah, indeed.
So what then happens if, unfortunately, and relationships can break down? So for me, that was a really some insightful thing. I don't want to give it obviously all away, because then there's no point listening.
No, I think I think you're right. And I think what's interesting to me in general, I mean, obviously the event, by the way, you can catch the webinar on our Elevate Your Clinic Academy Lite.
Correct. Yeah.
Just go and do a search for that, and you'll find the webinar. There's also a blog that accompanies the webinar that kind of explains the typical journey, or a hypothetical, a fable, a bit of a story about how people come together and work together, and then maybe things don't go as you might expect. But I think in general, we probably don't think about a lot of this stuff in life. We don't have to be in business. I mean, a lot of people don't have a will.
Yeah.
And are maybe put off having a will. So even something as basic as that can make a world of a difference to the life of your partner, your family, in the event that something happens to you as an individual. But then if you then build that into a business relationship, And if you think of a business relationship in parallel to a long-term civil partnership or a marriage, and then you multiply that by the number of directors within an organization, the chances and the risk of something not quite going right in everybody's life multiplies. And we don't always realize it's a bit like a domino effect, because if something happens to one party, the question is, how do you manage and limit the impact of all of that on the rest of the business and the partners and the livelihoods? And Amy and Sarah have a very quick canter through a very broad canvas of dimensions that it would be pertinent to think about, both in life and as a business owner. So yeah, I think it was a great piece, and I hope people are encouraged to go and pick it up and have a listen, have a watch.
No, certainly. And I think for me, it just shows what we're all about, that we're trying to highlight areas that can affect your business or can affect your life that you may not thinking about. And I think that's, one of our old mentors who says what we're trying to do and what we're passionate about is shining the torch beam on areas that you might not have considered.
Absolutely. And although it sounds a bit negative,
yeah,
I mean, we accepted this at the start, it sounds a bit dreary. We're talking about death and divorce and all that kind of, businesses going, parts of business going, or individuals going bankrupt and this kind of thing. Nobody really wants to think about it. But the problem is, if you sweep it under the carpet, it could come back to haunt you at some point. So if we've made you curious, then please go and have a watch. And our colleagues, affiliates at KBL, Sarah and Amy, and Anika are more than happy to give you some initial free advice on what you need to be thinking about within your organisation. And I guess that brings us on to
the next topic area that people try.
Yeah, which another topic that can often get swept under the carpet, I think, is clinical governance. And I know you had a great conversation recently.
Honestly, I mean, what the guys at so if you've not checked out HCPG, then .co.uk, I think they are. I'll put all of the links that we talk about on this podcast, I'll put in the podcast notes, so they're all there. So Phil's blog that he talked about and all those and the link to the Academy Light, I'll stick in the notes of this. Yeah, do you know what? They're doing some amazing work on pointing, shining torch beams. Let's keep this metaphor, an analogy during this, on areas which we know as healthcare professionals that we have to do. And that's the bit that I think, especially when I was listening to the one around chaperones, and, which is a topic of, when you sign to be, especially if you're a HCPC qualified physiotherapist, or you're registered physiotherapist, not qualified physiotherapist, registered, you sign almost a disclaimer every 2 years to say, yes, I will abide by your rules.
Yeah. And
the rules, so what that means is that, you have to be doing this, you have to be offering these things. So that was really important, that, they're shining light on areas of which, as a healthcare professional, we have to be taken into consideration as part of our whole customer service and our whole process. So for me, there was definitely, and what they describe aligns very much with what we were talking about. So we have our pre-arrival phase of our 10-step journey that we talk about. And the pre-arrival phase is basically setting expectation, telling the customer what they can get, what to expect. But what they shine it on from a clinical governance thing is actually what's the rights, and what rights do customers, patients have when they turn up to your clinic, and what they're entitled to and not. And it was a really other reframe of thinking about it. We think of it from expectations, so a customer knows what they're going to get from an experience. But actually, they reframe it in the way of going, well, actually, the healthcare professional, this is what you should be telling your customers at this point and your patients. And I think, oh my gosh, that's what a lovely way to put it. So, but also, it's probably an area, if I was to be big, brave and say, I don't think a lot of people do very well. And I don't think a lot of people are ticking that box to the way they need to be ticking that box, which is okay, because I think both Sandra and Sarah are non-scary and they're non-judgmental, and they're out to help and support, which is, I think, a really nice thing. But it certainly opened my eyes, Phil. And, when we were looking at the lone working one, I think it's how many people don't consider even themselves. So, where, we think about a lot of our listeners are setting out in business, and I did a great interview with Matt Taylor recently from Sano, which by the time of listening this, hopefully will be out on our academy. And he talked around how he set his whole business up with a folding bed in a gym. And I think lots of people, that's where we set up, that's how we set up.
You've got to start somewhere, haven't you?
You've got to start somewhere.
Starting that way.
When you think about it, you are alone in sometimes a corner room away from everybody else. Sometimes we don't stop and consider the risks of that on our own, and you think, God, and yeah. But then as an owner, and as certainly for us, when we went through this process, and actually we looked, and there were times where some of our physios were working alone with no support. So we then had to really think around, we sat down as an organization and, what do we need to do to put in place to make everyone feel safe? And we put those policies in place. So yeah, really good point. I think it's great with the work that they're doing. Great that they're shining torch beams on areas of where, again, most people are unfamiliar or the unsexy stuff, I guess, is the way.
Yeah, and I would say the other, just think about the lone working dimension. I mean, we talked, we're going to talk about the winter period in a few minutes time, but I remember when I was working in larger organizations, there were often conversations that were seasonal conversations about lone working. Because many people are actually working out on the patch. Some of our listeners may well be mobile in the work that they do, so they're going to other people's properties, or they're out moving around various localities. And obviously seasons, the dark, brings an extra dimension to lone working. And I know we used to have quite a few conversations about what that meant in practice and how teams kept in touch with one another, what the escalation process would be if somebody didn't check in. We often had people who would maybe have to park their car a considerable distance away from the building. Maybe the lighting in the car park wasn't particularly good. And all these things are things that, as a business owner, a responsible business owner, you would be thinking about. Now, we don't have control over all of those necessarily. Where we do, clearly we can put some strategies in place. But where we don't have direct control, perhaps we could have influence on where people park, or how well places are lit, or how people get that want to be accompanied on dark nights back to vehicles, or maybe people go home, collectively, and things like that. All those kind of things are perhaps more apparent now, and as a business owner, things that are really important to be thinking about, particularly as we come towards middle of autumn and into winter in any particular season. And that can change the element of risk that exists for you and your team and your customers, of course, because they could well be treading the same path as you will be to get to and from the car park. And if they don't feel safe, they'll probably go somewhere else where they feel safer to get their services from a different physio or a different clinic.
Really, really valid point, Phil. And I think it's one that I think we'll continue to discuss during this time, because I think it's
sure.
I'll also say in there, and I guess something that's raised in my head when I was thinking about that also, is if you've got staff that are also working alone in these kind of things, and the darker is, it's also consider how they are mentally. I think we look at the physicality dangers and stuff, but actually, I think it's becoming more and more prevalent that we need to consider, if you've got somebody in your organization or you working alone a lot of the time. And it was a really interesting point that Matt made yesterday when we were recording. It was actually, being a business owner can be a really lonely place. And if you're working long hours on your own also, then actually, what are you doing to also make sure you're being looked after? Looking after yourself or looking after your team.
I've certainly experienced that myself, actually, because I used to work a considerable distance away from home. So I would get up in the dark, drive to work in the dark, be in a building all day, not always see the outside world, get in the car, which happened to be an underground car park, which had its benefits and its disbenefits, drive home in the dark. And that was like three months of the year. And it had now I think about it, it just felt heavy, but actually the kind of the mental impact of living life in the dark isn't what as human beings we particularly do well. So you're absolutely right to raise that as an additional
just something for, I think, people to consider, isn't it?
Very much so. Yeah. It. And that leads us on to the M curve, Andy.
Yeah. So this is something that we've always seen a trend in the therapy world, in our own business, when we were measuring our own data, and then since going into the world that we now live in and looking at other people's data, there's certainly an M-shaped curve, or dips and troughs, and normally in the therapy world it looks a bit like an M. If you I guess my curiosity question, there's two things that when we were talking about this, one, how are people finding this as a curve in this year? So what is this looking like currently, in the basis that is the trend this year been different because the world's slightly different, and people are working more from home? Has that then changed because people are starting to return to offices over the last couple of months? Are we seeing that there being, are we going to see a shift? Do we think, or this year is just an abnormality? But one of the things that the reason being is that normally, if in the normal M-shaped curve, this, where we are, October going into November, is normally kind of a really high time for work. So, most people are really quite busy. They're seeing clinics full. They're all getting excited because their appointments are all full. And then what we do know is then we're going to go into this dip prior to Christmas and early January. And it's always something that I would suggest that, what do you do to plan for this? Because if you automatically are sat back going, there's no point, look at this, all of this marketing, all of this effort, all this thing we've done all year, it's all paying off because we're seeing a high level of customers and new customers. This is brilliant. But then all of a sudden you get a dip. How are you planning for that? Because, and again, I've been having lots of conversations and there's lots of content coming out on our academy. And Obi Hassan, who hopefully we're going to be getting on some more stuff with him, has been talking around cash flow and forecasting and all these kind of things. And they're all really valid when it comes to looking at peaks and troughs of business and what are you doing? Because there are going to be times where we're at a high and there's going to be times we're in a low, and it's how do you control the lows is my always question, is what are you doing? And one of the things I see an awful lot is especially when we're busy, we fail to plan for the low because we sit in there and go, just busy. Well,
it strikes me, that when we talk about the low, I mean, there's a financial impact of it. So we need to be thinking about cash flow in terms of, smoothing out the M so that we've got continuity. But then there's the opportunity that being less busy promotes within the organization, actually, and how you use your own time, how you would plan and use the time of your team if they're not as busy. What opportunities are there within the business actually for development, for growth, for refurbishment, for perhaps even thinking about running different products or different service lines that may appeal to individuals that aren't part of run-of-the-mill, and you wouldn't normally be able to fit them into the program because you're so busy. So actually there's quite a number of dimensions, aren't there, to thinking about the quieter periods.
100%, Phil, and I think that's the whole when we plan, isn't it? It's there's the classic of, well, market when you're busy because you're marketing then for your quiet time. So again, we're talking about how do you null the loop of the M. But I think a really valid comment of going, well, how do you make it productive? People are, I don't have time to train my staff. Here could be a time where actually we can be productive. We know we're going to be less busy. So can we then, is this an opportunity to put more training in there? I think that's a really valid point. Or is it the time where we go, right, okay, we've got some headspace. This is where we do our audits.
I was just going to say, could be the time for a clinical audit.
Yeah, this is the time where we,
audit. And,
yeah, this is where we do all the stuff where you go, okay, so this is productive.
Get your beds maintained and serviced, all that kind
100%.
of stuff.
Have you been reading our plan for December? This is almost identical to everything that we've done. But that's it. That's where we know that, we know, and we always have a spare bed. We're very fortunate that we always have one. So one's always maintained and being rotated.
Yeah.
But actually we've got two that need maintaining. So we know that we're planning it, that during this time, that we've got an opportunity where, because we're going to be less busy, that we can get one, we can probably have two out of service and still be all right because of that effectiveness.
And I guess the other dimension to this, I don't know whether it happens in the same way, but I've kind of experienced this in a different arena, where if everybody's trying to do the same thing, then actually if there's a skill set, if you actually need somebody to come in and service your beds, and suddenly all therapy practices across the UK are all wanting Andy to come and fix the bed on a Tuesday, then actually, if you haven't planned and prepared and put those contracts and those relationships in place, then you're going to miss your opportunity, and then you're going to have to get your beds fixed in the busiest period of time, and then start to impact cash flow, let customers down, all that. So actually, there's a real purpose to this part of dialogue at this time of the year, I guess.
100%. And this is where we, if we could say what we're on a mission for is to just, sometimes make the obvious louder, to put it in the nicest possible way. We've all got these heads that, most of the things we come across is you would argue a common sense approach. I think for most people, they're so busy that sometimes it doesn't always get done in action. So, for us, the more that we can keep pushing people to go, look, this is the time, think about your busy periods. How are we going to make your busy time productive so that you're getting the jobs done? Because in the busier times, you're not going to be able to get them done. And
I would argue it's also a great time to be planning the next 12 months. So actually to revision, to replan, to put some of those goals in place, to communicate those to the right members of the team or the right partners that you're working with, will actually set you up clean for the year that's coming. Or if you're in those M's, then wherever there's a quiet piece, if they are from the data that you're measuring, then they're the times when you would be preparing to take stock, replan, and plan your next period of stabilization or growth, dependent on where you are in your own business curve.
Absolutely agree. So there's some really big points come up on there.
Yeah, so that's going to bring us on then, isn't it? Because to staff parties, and there was a time, of course, when staff parties were a bit more open, perhaps a bit more chaotic, and life is moving on, and legislative requirements and good practice, safeguarding, all play a really important part, particularly in with the attention that's been given in the last 12 months, 2 years, around what is and isn't socially acceptable in work and in life. And one of the things we thought we would do, as we're running up to a major festival period, was actually get some good helpful reminders on the tips, the responsibilities, the accountabilities of business owners and team members to party safely. So look out for some future content in a podcast that's coming.
No, certainly agree with all that. So, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick promo that says we've got a series of webinars as always.
Yeah.
So go and have a look at our Eventbrite page, and if you're not already a follower on that, then please follow us on Eventbrite, and you'll be able to keep up with what's happening on the webinars. And obviously look out for our social media feeds, because there's always plenty of information there on new content, new ideas, new webinars, links to new information that we've got on the Academy. If you've not yet had a look at Academy Lite, which is our free site to give you a taster of what lies behind the academy, then please go and take a look at EYC Academy Lite.
No, certainly.
And I
Like I
think-
said, the links will be in the bottom of this as well, so you can just click on the link and go through. And if you're watching this on Academy Lite, welcome and thank you. And then keep checking out to see what new content we're putting on our full academy every month. So
Yeah,
lots of really exciting stuff coming up. As there, loads of nice speakers, loads of good content already on there and continuously going on.
fantastic. So we've talked about, it's not me, it's you. We talked quite a bit about clinical governance and thinking about keeping your audit and keeping your business practice up to the appropriate quality standards and requirements, planning for those quieter periods of time and Andy's M curve, and then a bit of preparation around thinking about festivals, parties, and keeping safe. So until next time, Andy.
Thank you very much, Phil. Have a lovely day.
Take care.